Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, John.
How we doing?
All right.
Good to see you, Mark.
Good to see you too. All right. Well, I'll be back in a few minutes. We start at noon?
Yes, sir. Thereabouts. Usually it's a few after, just because
Got it.
letting people kind of join in, things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome, Bill.
I'm logging in from Schaumburg, Illinois, about 30 miles northwest of downtown.
Outstanding. Very cool. Lisa, how are you?
Sorry about that. I was pulling something up to print. I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I am well. I figured that's what you were working on.
Yeah, I'm printing out the bios, so I'm gonna hop off for just a second.
No problem.
Lisa.
Ben, welcome. How are you?
Hey there. Hey, John. I'm doing very well. How about you?
There's
Good,
Ben.
thanks.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Doing quite well. It feels strange. I've been working from home, for so long now. I'm getting a little bit shaggier than I used to be. So,
Yeah, my short hair is now long. Is
yeah.
it just gonna be you, or is Amanda up to it today?
No, I think it's just going to be me. Amanda's still with her family right now.
Yeah.
So it'll be flying solo. I hope that's all right.
No, that's great. Yeah, I need to get a card in the mail to her. What a devastating loss at any time, but really hard when you can't gather with your friends and family, and and that's tough.
Yeah, I think it's a real challenge for everybody right now. I mean, especially for that exact reason. I mean, it's hard to sort of grieve at a distance, right?
It is.
So I'm not quite sure what the details of, arrangements will be, but I know it's hard on her family and everybody else. Just not being able to be closer to one another, especially for services and things like that. So
Sure. Yeah, it makes it really hard. Well, thank you for being here.
yeah, of course.
Hey, Ben, real quick, do you have any presentation or anything like that that you need to share today?
Yeah, I do. I've got a PowerPoint, and my thought was if I have the ability to share my screen, that I would just do that.
That's perfect. Yeah, you should. And so if you don't, let me know, and we'll make sure that that we get that squared away.
Okay. Yep, I clicked my shared screen. It looks like it populates the menu. So it looks like I can do that. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Welcome, Lori. How are you? Jana, thanks for joining us.
By the way, John, I apologize if it looks like sometimes I'm not looking at you guys. I've got a dual screen set up here, and I've got different things going on different screens, but I promise my attention is here.
I appreciate that. It's definitely, the new world that we're living in, man. It's all bets are off. So appreciate the heads up.
Yep.
Claudia, good to see you. How are you?
Hi, good. I'm good. I'm really excited because on May 4th, we're going to be allowed to go for a walk outside. So I'm super happy about that. And yeah.
Wow.
Okay,
Great to see you.
okay.
Thank you.
Hi, Claudia.
Hi, Mark.
Good to see you. Been
Me
forever.
too.
I just told Janet you're on. Give her, say hi.
Claudia, hello.
Hi. How are you?
Hey, good to see you.
I know.
Wow, what time is it there?
Oh, it's almost 8 p.m.
Oh my goodness. Well, what a nice way to end your evening. Good to see you.
Well, yeah. Bye.
Interesting. Claudia's on from Rowland.
Hi, Lee. How are you?
I'm doing good, John. How about you?
I'm great. Thanks for joining in today.
Hey, thank you for the invitation. This is going to be really fun. I'm excited I get to attend one of your meetings.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise, for sure. Still got quite a few folks joining in, so we'll give it a few more minutes before we get our meeting started here.
I'm hoping that Ryan will be able to join us today again as a visiting Rotarian to give an update on his dad.
Yeah, I don't know if he will or not. I know he's been pretty busy, and I actually just talked to Mike here about 20 minutes ago. So if he's not on, I'll be able to kind of fill in with an update on Mike here in just a little bit.
Fantastic. This is the quietest this group has ever been, I think. Kind of crazy. I love the people who have their cameras on. I can see faces. I miss you guys and gals.
Yeah, pretty cool. So like I said, we still got quite a few folks jumping in right now, but just kind of the same that we've been doing the last couple of weeks. I will say thanks everybody for jumping in and trying to work our way through this new normal that we have. But to try and keep things running as efficiently as possible, if you've got questions or thoughts or comments or anything like that, you can certainly use the chat line, the chat box there on the side. And Lisa is going to be kind of monitoring that for me. Certainly also feel free to send either her or myself regular text messages as well, so that if you got comments or thoughts, we can get those out to everybody. But Lisa's going to kind of be monitoring that stuff for me so that we can try to make it most efficient. So if anybody has any thoughts or comments or anything like that, get them off to Lisa, and we'll be able to go from there. Alicia, welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm going to listen to my meeting here.
Alicia, when do you guys have your meetings?
We conduct our meeting on the 4th and on the 2nd and 4th Monday of the month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Outstanding. I think I saw that Mike Howe joined you last. I would certainly love to try to figure out a way to join in on one of your meetings. That's really cool. I really appreciate you continuing.
No problem. I'll send that information on.
Yeah, that'd be great, Alicia, if you don't mind.
Alrighty.
turn my sound off here. You got no sound up there.
All right, folks. Well, we've still got folks jumping in, but I do want to be respectful of everybody's time and be productive here. So let's go ahead and kind of get our meeting officially started. Again, for those of you just joining or joined late, if you got comments, questions, anything like that, use the chat box or messenger or something like that and get to information to Lisa. She'll get that off to me so that we can make the announcements as needed. And as we do kind of get started here, I am going to mute everybody so that we don't get too much background noise, and we'll work our way through that. If you got something, or you can even raise your hand, something like that, so we can be productive. But to get things kind of kicked off, I am going to turn it over to our own Miss Vickery Hall. Vickery, where'd you go? I think you can unmute yourself, Vickery. There you are. There you are. I found you. So Vickery's going to do our inspiration pledge and full-way test to get us kicked off today. So Vickery, the floor is yours.
Great. And you guys can hear me now? Looks like it. Okay. Well, like many of you guys, I am home with my young children right now. And while all of our lives have changed, I sometimes feel like theirs has changed the most. And it's been challenging to talk to my kids about all of this uncertainty and when they'll go back to school, and I just don't have any answers. And even though this is the first pandemic I've lived through, it's not the first time parents have had to talk to their kids about really challenging circumstances. And so I have turned to the expert, Mr. Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And one of his stories that he's super famous for, and this is the quote I'm bringing today for our inspiration, is it was like this: when I would see scary things on the news, my mother would say to me, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." To this day, especially in times of disaster, I remember my mother's words, and I'm always comforted by realizing that there are still so many helpers, so many caring people in this world. And along with that, that was the end of the quote. He also advised parents to turn off the television, which I'm sure he would amend today to saying set down your smartphone, which I need to do better at, and to maintain regular routines and to offer physical affection to help children feel safe. So, these are all ways to help children through worry in times of crisis. And I know we sometimes feel as helpless as children in this. So the nice thing is that we can go, as adults, we can go beyond looking for the helpers and strive to be a helper. So that is my inspiration today, is to be a helper. So moving on to the pledge, which I understand I will also be doing instead of everyone trying to say it at the same time. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do: is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, I turn it back over to you, John.
Awesome, Vickery. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that, leading us through that and getting us started. I do kind of want to go through, we've got some visitors today, so I want to try to have everybody that I can. If I miss you, my apologies. Send me a message or something like that. But like we've tried to do, is let everybody introduce themselves as I call on you as guests. So we'll go through that here real quick. Lee Nelson, you want to introduce yourself and let us know where you're from? Oh, let me unmute you there.
Whoops. There. Hi. Hey, John, thank you so much for inviting me. I had an opportunity to come meet a lot of your club members a little over a year ago, and I had a wonderful chance to do a shelter box presentation with Mike. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't because he was watching me do the presentation, but I've heard a lot of great things about Mike and the shelter box presentations that he's done. So, I embarrassed him. He hit his video. Yeah, now he's shaking his head. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to come back and say hi to everybody. you know, this pandemic is hard, but it gives all of us in the district governor line an opportunity to attend a lot of meetings and see everybody again and take the time and look and see what your clubs are doing. So I hope that the pandemic settles down and that you get a chance to do your 2020 Duck Derby and that you can do your 10th annual golf tournament. But I just wanted to tell all of you that the Casper Club is so impressive. I've been watching the events that you've done over the past 2 years, and you guys are truly a great group of Rotarians that make every district governor in the line proud of what you've all done over the last several years. And when I look at the history of the donations that you've done to Shelter Box, it makes me very grateful that you are here in 5440. So John, thanks for letting me attend your meeting today.
Lee, thank you, and thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know, Lee is our current district governor-elect nominee. I think I've got that right, Lee. So we look forward to supporting you as you continue your leadership journey for our district. So that's great.
Thanks.
Claudia, you want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah, hi. Like I said last time, I was an exchange student almost 3 years ago in Casper. And so I just wanted to say hi, and I'm super glad I can attend these meetings since, well, I miss them. Like, I miss Wyoming and all of the people I met there, and just wanted to thank you again and again. I will never stop for the opportunity you gave me. So thanks, guys.
Claudia, great to see you, and thanks for joining in again, because I know it's late in the evening where you are there in Daly, so it's great to see you. Alicia, if you want to say hello, Alicia Lake.
Hi again. Hi, everyone from St. Martin, District 7020. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Bill Matthews, you want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon, I guess. I'm calling from, or Zooming actually from Schaumburg, Illinois. I'm with the Schaumburg Game Rotary Club. We're a small club, about 17 members. I guess one of the benefits of this pandemic is being able to attend all these meetings. Last week at this time, I was in London, virtually, not physically. And I've been to Texas and Florida, and I've got a couple other cities lined up. So it's one benefit of seeing a bunch of Rotarians. And honestly, every club, you get a lot of the same ideas, same thoughts, and we're all in this together. So I wish you guys all the best of luck.
Bill, thank you for that, and thanks for joining us. Yes, there's a little bit of that silver lining with this craziness we have going on. So again, thanks for joining us. Do see that we got Miss Julie Aubrey joining us again. Julie, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me join again. I've really been looking forward to Monday lunchtime to see you all. And I have a little bit of news if you guys haven't heard already. So you know that the Rotary International Convention that was set to be taking place in Honolulu, which of course was canceled, it sounds like they are going to be making the convention virtual. And so far, I think that, yeah, it's the first time we've done some live streams of certain sessions, but for the first time ever, we're going to have a virtual convention. And right now, I think the dates are June 21st through the 26th. We'll be sending out more information. But if you've never been to a Rotary International Convention, it's incredible. And now is a great opportunity to try it out if you've never been in person, to get a taste. Along with visiting all these different clubs from all over the world, it's another way to really see the internationality of Rotary. So I'll let you know if I hear of any updates further regarding speakers or different sessions, but something to look forward to right now.
Julie, thank you. That's wild. Good news. Making the best of it. Although I can tell you, here recently, going to Honolulu sounded pretty nice, to be honest with you, from Wyoming.
Agreed, from Illinois.
Right. Well, thanks for the update and great seeing you. Jeff Cochran, it's great to see you or have you on the phone with us again today.
Hi guys, great to be back. This is my second drop-in visit with you all. I was here last week for the first time, thanks to Julie Aubrey giving me the heads up. So good to be here with you again. I had so much fun last week, I thought I'd do it again. So here we are. Just for those of you that don't know, I'm Annual Giving Officer with the Rotary Foundation, representing zones 26 and 27, and by extension, your district and your club. So it's great to be back. Thanks for having me again.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate that. I know we've got a couple visiting Rotarians, Alyssa Ruckel from Five Trails and Ryan Stepp from Five Trails as well. Welcome, guys. Great to have you guys joining us with that as well. So appreciate that. I think I've got most everybody there on the guest list. If I miss somebody, let me know. My apologies, but we'll continue to work our way through this. So as we move down our agenda, getting into Family of Rotary, obviously last week we talked about some challenges with fellow Rotarian Mike Stepp and him being in the hospital and kind of in some serious conditions. I sent out an email update on Thursday that had kind of some positive tones to it, which might have slightly been a bit ahead of what I should have done, I guess. But you know, I'll let Ryan. I think you're on here, Ryan.
I am.
Give a more update. I talked to your dad here about 20 minutes ago, so he sounds like he's in good spirits. But since I sent out an email, things have kind of changed a little bit. So Ryan, you want to kind of give us an update on your dad?
Hey, John.
Things are improving gradually, but definitely improving. And his case manager at the hospital started paperwork on Friday. He is leaving Casper at 7 p.m. tonight. He's heading to CU Hospital in Denver to undergo bypass surgery. Pretty extensive illness in his heart that makes it a much better option for him to go down there where they have other implements that they can make use of, different kind of pumps and stuff. So when he comes off a bypass, they can make sure that they're successful. So we're ever hopeful and optimistic and praying for good outcome from this, but he'll be in Denver for the rest of this week.
Got it. Thanks, Mike, or thanks, Ryan. Appreciate the update. I think, you know, as it continues, I know you've heard from a lot of folks, and so has your dad. From the Family of Rotary is a pretty big family through extension there. But continue, if you guys need anything, whether it's you, your sister, your dad, what have you, let us know. We've got a big group of folks ready and willing to help wherever we can, even if that's packing candy down at the shop or cleaning floors or whatever it is. You just let us know what we can do to help you guys.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
I can, Lisa.
I believe Mike is on. Mike, are you here?
No, it was me that logged in.
Oh, okay. I saw he logged in and it says.
It was me, but it said his name, so.
Oh, okay. I
did log in. Can you hear me?
Very good.
Can you hear me now?
Wrong Mike.
Yeah, no, we were talking Mike Stepp, but hey, Mike, how are you?
So Ryan, thanks for the update. Like I said, continue to keep us posted on anything that comes up there. Anybody else have Family of Rotary items? If you do, certainly let me know or let Lisa know, and we'll get them announced. Did get a message here. Appreciate that. Do want to extend a welcome again to Senator Barrasso joining us from Washington, D.C. I assume, Senator, you're in Washington now?
Oh, yeah. John, thanks so much for your continued leadership. I'm actually in DC planning to go back. I'm in Wyoming in Casper. We Zoomed church yesterday, doing this today. We have a meeting with the county commissioners by cell phone and by a phone meeting of all the county commissioners later today to go over some things. The big thing that's happened now is this morning, the lending window has opened again with the Paycheck Protection Plan, another over $310 billion in there. You know, in Wyoming, got out about over 800 million. Thousands of people have taken advantage of the loans. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, you want to talk with your local banking officer and have a chance to do that today, because the fund has now been replenished, and I'll be heading back to DC on Sunday.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your leadership and what you're doing for Wyoming.
Thank you.
One other item we do have for Family of Rotary. I know we got an email out last week, but Fred, I'm sure I'm going to screw this last name up, Nighthammer, I believe. He was a Rotarian in our club for 41 years. He passed away last Friday. So if anybody knows of him or his family, certainly keep them in your thoughts as well. If anybody has anything else for Family Rotary, let me know. Rotarians of the Week as we move on. I did get, or I do want to nominate Leah Reed Varela. Many of you that are on our social media stuff or that follow any of that see that that's been real active and busy, which is great. Leah's really taken charge of that, her and her crew over there at Loom Studio. So I want to give her a shout out because that's helping us get the word of Rotary out and also be able to extend our reach to our friends around the globe that are able to join us with these kind of meetings through how they learn about our meetings through social media. So I want to say a big thanks to Leah on that. So if anybody else has Rotarians of the Week, let us know and we'll get those announced as best we can. Under announcements, just have one real quick one. And I think we had an email go out as well, but we are going to do a virtual orientation. We were planning on having a live face-to-face one in April, but we're going to change that to a Zoom meeting. That'll be on May 7th at 5:30. That is obviously open to any red badgers that need to get that checked off to get your blue badge, but also open to anyone that wants to learn more about Rotary and any of that kind of stuff. So that'll be, like I said, 5:30, May 7th. I know I talked with Mike Laugy this morning. We're trying to figure out some ways that we can make that interactive and more fun. You know, we usually have a little bit of a happy hour when we do it in person. So we're trying to figure out a way that we can make that a bit of a social event as well. So we'll keep you posted on that, but respond to either myself or Mike via RSVP so that we can know how many folks we have lined up for that. So Steve Lofton just also made an announcement that on next Monday, looks like we're going to have our regular food bank of the Rockies packing that we do there. That's scheduled for 1:30. That's the first Monday of the month. So Steve, I appreciate that. Very cool. So thank you for that. And then Ryan Stepp did want to acknowledge Lisa Scroggins, Dan Foote, and Miami Sleep as Rotarians of the Week, as well as Mike McIntosh for helping get the place ready for Mike when he came back home. So great job, guys. That's outstanding. Okay, as we continue to move forward, I do want to, I guess, Lisa, we're kind of at that point in time. We have one other guest that I'm going to let you introduce that's going to give a presentation to us today, and he's got a show that we get to watch. So Lisa, I'm turning it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. So today we have actually one speaker. I know when we last week I announced that we were going to have two, but one of them is unable to join us. But he is an associate with Davis and Cannon LLP, a law firm from Cheyenne. And prior to being there, he served as an assistant city attorney for Cheyenne and was a law clerk for both Chief Justice Nancy Friedenthal of the U.S. District Court and for the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Prior to law school, our guest attended Duke University, where he majored in public policies and studies and minored in political science, and enjoyed his time as a member of the Duke University swim team. In his free time, our speaker enjoys swimming and also enjoys traveling in and learning more about the great state of Wyoming. So Rotarians, please help me welcome Benjamin Rowland. Yay. So now, Ben, if you would unmute.
Sure. Thank you very much, guys. And thank you, Lisa, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you, John, for having me. And thank you, everybody, for the privilege of joining you guys today. I am going to share my screen, if you'll bear with me for just one moment. And I've got a little PowerPoint that I'm going to be sharing with you. Let's see. Okay, you should all have the PowerPoint in front of you now, I believe. And I am reconfiguring my screen. All right, there we go. All right, well, first off, I want to say, thank you again. Much appreciated for having me. And I also want to say thanks to Senator Barrasso for the reminder at the top. He made a good point, and it was one that I was going to share as well, that as of this morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 a.m. our time, the Paycheck Protection Program, that some of you might be familiar with already. The funding has been replenished and the application went live again I believe at 8:30 a.m. our local time. So if you're an employer interested in that, it is now live again, and you should be able to submit your applications. So with that said, I've got a short presentation with you. The focus will not be on the Paycheck Protection Program. Hopefully this will be about 15 minutes, perhaps a little bit less. And with that, I am going to go ahead and jump on in. So first things first, kind of big picture overview. What has the federal government done so far about the COVID-19 response? 4 real pieces of legislation that I wanted to identify for everybody, one of which we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail here today. The first, called Phase 1 of the Phase 1, was a piece of legislation referred to in the shorthand as the Coronavirus Supplemental Act, and that's basically a supplemental appropriation for the federal government to fund agencies to support these efforts. The second, which is really the focus of what we're going to talk about today, is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. I keep referring to it in my mind as FCRA, only because it seems awkward to keep saying the FFCRA, but think of it how you will. Phase 3 is one that I think a lot of you have probably heard about already as well. The shorthand for it is the CARES Act, and that's an acronym for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And that was sort of a bigger picture economic stimulus package for the United States sort of writ large there. We're not really going to be focusing on this a whole lot today. And then the last one that I want to point out was the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act, which was a sort of Phase 4 piece of federal legislation, which, as Senator Barrasso mentioned, replenished some of the funding that was available, added another $300 and some odd billion for small employers all over the United States to help fund their payrolls during what's obviously a difficult time. So, all right, why don't we just jump in? So today, like I said, we're going to be primarily focusing on the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, or FCRA, like I said, as I keep referring to it. Some of the basics. You know, I know here in Wyoming, we might not think about, you know, some of this federal legislation all the time. It might seem distant, but this thing really, really impacts a lot of our lives right now, especially if you are an employer yourself or you work at a business that has been impacted by the coronavirus. So when did it go in effect? The legislation was passed in mid-March, and it went into effect on April 1st. So who does this thing apply to? If you are an employer and you have 500 or fewer employees, this piece of legislation applies to you. So if you're a bigger company, you know, 501 plus employees, not applicable. But I mean, these are still potentially some fairly large companies, ranging all the way up to 500 there. In terms of the real sort of basics, and this is kind of a what does it actually do for us? I've boiled it down into sort of 3 things, 2 of which we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail today. The first is that it expands what's called the Family Medical Leave Act. I imagine a lot of people are familiar with that in their own work. The second part is that it provides emergency paid sick leave for employees. Let's see, sorry, just rearranging my screen a little bit here. And then the third part, to help sort of alleviate the burden to employers, the costs of implementing some of these programs, there are refundable tax credits that will be available to these employers to help offset these costs. So, all right. So, how did the FMLA expand as a result of this new law? We're starting off with the first sort of significant change there. So there were 3 sort of expansions that I want to touch on today. One of the big ones was under the FMLA, an employee had to be with the employer for about a year, not about a year, for a year, before they were eligible to take leave under the Family Medical Leave Act. Big change here. An employee only has to be with the employer for 30 days. before they're eligible for this additional leave. The second big change added a reason that you can take family medical leave under the Act. So if your child's school or their place of like daycare, for example, is closed or canceled as a result of the COVID virus, now that employee caretaker can take this expanded family medical leave to take care of that kid while their school is closed, basically. So, and the third big change that I want to point out is that previously under the Family Medical Leave Act, employees were entitled to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. And now, if you're taking leave for this reason, that your kid's school or place of care was canceled, now you also get 2 weeks of unpaid leave and 10 weeks of paid leave while your kid's school or place of care is closed due to the COVID-19. So, and all of these impact employer obligations to their employees. So what you should be aware of is that, one, like I said, employees, they've got to be with you for 30 days or longer to be eligible for this leave. And it applies if their kid's school or their place of daycare, for example, is closed or canceled due to COVID-19. I also want to note that the application of this leave is sort of intertwined with the law's requirement for this emergency paid sick leave, and we're going to turn to that next. So, how does this Emergency Family Leave Act expansion relate to this, this expanded FMLA relate to the new emergency paid sick leave? Well, employers are required to provide 2 weeks of unpaid leave and 10 weeks of paid leave under this expanded FMLA. And for those 2 weeks of unpaid leave that you're entitled to, an employee may use their emergency paid sick leave to substitute for that time. So the employee gets their 2 weeks, they're entitled to it, of unpaid leave, then their 10 weeks of paid leave, but under a separate part of the Act, they're entitled to 2 weeks of immediate paid sick leave if they need it. And they can swap in that paid sick leave time for the what would otherwise be unpaid time. So let's move on here. So what employees are actually eligible for this emergency paid sick leave that we're talking about? The answer is really any employee. There's no requirement that they've been employed with the employer for any specific amount of time. So we were talking about family medical leave before, and the employee has to have been with the employer for 30 days. But for this emergency paid sick leave, that's not true. If the employee is hired, they're entitled to this emergency paid sick leave. And the paid sick leave is available for immediate use, regardless of how long. So, anything between, zero, and 30 days, if they have been hired, they are eligible to use that emergency paid sick leave under the Act. So, in terms of what reasons they can use this emergency paid sick leave, so the Act doesn't expand the sick leave so that you can take it for just any old reason. This is strictly limited to a COVID-19 related illness or reason, right? So these are the 6 reasons that are identified in the law. So number 1, if you are subject to a stay-at-home order, we don't currently have a stay-at-home order in place here in Wyoming. A number of other states have had those, but that would be a qualifying reason. If you are advised to stay home by a healthcare provider, that's a qualifying reason where you're entitled to that emergency paid sick leave. If you have any COVID-like symptoms and you have sought a diagnosis, that qualifies you for the sick leave. Keep in mind that it doesn't say that you have to have been diagnosed with COVID-19. It says that you've sought out a diagnosis and you've had these COVID-like symptoms. Are you caring for somebody that's required to stay at home for a COVID-like, for a COVID-related reason? you're qualified? Or are you caring for a child whose school was closed or whose place of daycare was closed? You're also entitled to this emergency paid sick leave. And then lastly, this one's a little bit of a catch-all, but are you experiencing another substantially similar condition? You could also be entitled to this emergency paid sick leave. So, all right. So your next question might be, well, how much paid sick leave are we talking about? How much do I as the employee or is the employer entitled to offer me? And the answer is, if you're a full-time employee, you get roughly 80 hours. That's 2 work weeks of emergency paid sick leave. And if you're a part-time worker, the number really varies. It can vary a lot. It depends on what you would have ordinarily been scheduled to work in the preceding 2 weeks. So that could be very few hours. It could be just shy of being a full-time employee. But it really depends on the usual number of hours that you would have been scheduled to take. But you'd be entitled to that amount of paid sick leave. So, and I talked about this a little bit before, but I'll just flag for everybody's attention that this 80 hours corresponds to the 2 weeks of unpaid leave that employees are entitled to under that Expanded Family Medical Leave Act. So idea being that an employee can substitute that, paid sick leave time for the 2 weeks of unpaid leave under the Expanded Family Medical Leave Act. So you might be thinking, well, if I'm an employer, I already offer my employees paid sick leave. How does this whole thing relate to the sick leave that I already offer? Do they get to have that leave too? And the answer is yes, that's generally true. They still are entitled to their whatever paid sick leave they did have. But the employee might choose to substitute that employer paid sick leave for the emergency paid sick leave provided for under the law. Another thing that employees might do, they can use their employer's paid sick leave to do what's called truing up their pay. So for example, the law provides for 2/3 pay for while you're out on this paid sick leave, but they might use their employer provided paid sick leave to do what's called truing up their pay, basically bringing it back up to full pay while they're out on their emergency paid sick leave. So the key here though for employers is that you can't require your employee to actually take their employer provided time before they take advantage of the paid sick leave under the act. So that's a real key point. You can't make that a condition for your employee taking the emergency paid sick leave. So next question. You might be wondering, how much do employees actually get when they're out on this paid sick leave? So there are a few different rules here. It generally depends on the reason that you're taking the leave or that the employee is taking the leave. So you'll get your regular rate of pay, but it maxes out at at $511 per day. For the 10-day period, it can't be more than $5,100 if the reason for taking the leave is either number 1, 2, or 3 on the list. So if we circle back that list, 1, 2, and 3, if you're ordered to stay at home, if your healthcare provider told you to stay at home, or if you've got COVID-like symptoms, you're eligible to get $511 a day for your paid sick leave for no more than about $5,100. So otherwise, you can get 2/3 of your regular rate of pay for that emergency paid sick leave time. It maxes out at $200 a day or $2,000 in the aggregate for the other reasons on the list. And note also that when you're on paid sick leave, because you're caring for example, a child that school is closed or their daycare is closed, you're entitled to 2/3 of your regular rate of pay during that 10 weeks of paid leave, but it maxes out again at $12,000. That includes all 12 weeks, right? If you use 2 weeks of your paid sick leave and then the 10 weeks of family medical leave leave. So let's see, we're getting short on time here. Couple other points to cover. This probably sounds like a lot for employers, right? Like it's very important for employees too, obviously. You might ask, are there any exceptions? Because maybe I'm a very small employer. And the answer is yes. The Department of Labor has issued some guidance on this. So employers that have 50 or fewer employees, they can be exempt if they apply for that exemption, and if compliance would otherwise jeopardize their viability as an organization. There is a little bit more detail. There's some sort of more meat on the bones there, defining what that means, and I'm not going to get into it right now. But there is some further guidance on what that means for folks. And lastly, how do I communicate this to employees? How do employees know about it? If you're an employer, you're obligated to post a notice in your place of work that lists out all of the employees' rights. And now, because a lot of us are working remotely, there are alternative ways to quote unquote post the notice, because I understand we're not all in the office right now. So including emailing everybody in your place of employment, things like that. So that's really about all I'm going to cover today. That's a really sort of basic level view of what's covered in this Families First Corona Response Act. I'm happy to take any questions. I know that stuff is, it can be a little bit dry, but it is important if you are an employer or an employee from both perspectives, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you guys might have on it. But that's about all I've got for you today. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. This is Lisa. I actually have a question about the if somebody is seeking diagnosis and what that actually means to seek a diagnosis. Does that include like calling a teledoc to go over a list of symptoms to see if you need further testing? It doesn't really just mean that they've been tested, because in Wyoming, of course, we don't have tests available. So what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so my understanding of what it means is that you have to have actually consulted with a healthcare provider. And keep in mind that it doesn't necessarily have to be a doctor. Your healthcare provider might be, an FNP or something like that as well. An employer can ask for documentation of you having sought that diagnosis. So my understanding is that it could include telemedicine, for example, which I know this law, the CARES Act, and some of the recent legislation has provided additional funding for telemedicine. So if your question is specifically related to telemedicine, I think that is true that you can seek out a diagnosis via, like a telemedicine appointment with your physician. But I think an employer can require documentation. And in terms of the actual documentation, it might be a note from your doctor, frankly, something like that, that indicates that you sought out that diagnosis. But some sort of documentation is useful to prove that to your employer.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
And I must have blipped out for just a minute, but are these only for small companies, or are they for any size company, these benefits?
So the law only applies to companies that have 500 or fewer employees. So some might say that 500 employees is quite large,
Yeah.
but in the sort of parlance of the statute, these are for small businesses.
Okay.
And there is an exemption, a possible exemption on the bottom end of that scale. So if you're an employer that has 50 or fewer employees, you might reasonably say, wow, if somebody is so critical to my business and they have to go out on leave, I just cannot continue my operation as a result. There is an exemption available. The employer has to apply for it. And there is a little bit more detail available on the Department of Labor website about how to do that. But generally 500 and fewer employees, it applies to you. And if you are 50 or fewer employees, you can apply for exemptions to these requirements.
So I'm thinking particularly for my daughter who works for a very large company, way over 500 employees. Do they have any requirement to offer those same kinds of services when childcare, this would be her situation where, you know, she's having to care for a child at home?
Yeah. My understanding is that the Families First Coronavirus Response Act does not apply to these companies. It only applies to companies with 500 or fewer employees. That said, a number of states have adopted legislation to try to address this, is my understanding. But this particular law, the federal law, applies to companies only with 500 or fewer employees.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question, Deb.
Yep. Good to see everybody.
You as well, Deb. We got any other questions for Ben?
I see a question in the chat from Jimmy. I guess it's Jimmy Goolsby. He said he realizes you didn't cover PPP, but he was wondering what is included in the utilities and rent portion. And his question says, does it also include insurance or other costs related to maintaining the property?
So I don't know the answer about, for example, property insurance. I know, for example, like healthcare benefits insurance that you might provide, those benefits are counted in the payroll costs because under the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP loan program, those loans are entirely forgivable, is my understanding, if 75% or more of the money goes to protecting the payroll of your employees. And included in that amount of quote unquote payroll costs would be employee benefits, like, for example, health insurance. But for property insurance, I don't know the answer to that specifically offhand. I know in those other amounts, you can use it for, you know, rent payments, utilities, mortgage payments, interest on debt obligations, things like that. But for the loan to be totally forgiven, those amounts can't exceed 25% of the total value, is my understanding. But I don't know the specific answer to whether or not insurance, like property insurance, for example, if you're able to use your PPP money for payment of property insurance. And I'd be happy to look that up.
Thanks, Ben. Lisa, do we have any other questions coming in?
I don't see any questions over there. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, Ben, I want to say a big thanks for joining us from Cheyenne. Really appreciate that. That's a lot of information. If we do have more questions, what we'll do is we'll have folks send an email to either Lisa or myself that we can then forward on to you, if you don't mind, if we got some other questions coming in, and kind of go from there.
That sounds great. And thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. And I know that was kind of dense, a lot of information, but I hope it was helpful to some folks.
Definitely helpful, Ben. And you're right. It's, you know, not always the most exciting stuff, but certainly very important. So I appreciate you taking the time and going through it with us. So
yeah, sure. No problem. Thank you.
Lisa, what do we got lined up for next week?
So next week is a little bit up in the air. I am just waiting for a final confirmation. We, a while back, we had a snow day, which was another unusual situation for Rotary. And we missed our presenter, and I believe he is going to be presenting. I just want to do one more verification. So I will shoot an email out to the club today through Lori. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. With that, I want to say again, thanks everybody for tuning in. Vickery, thanks for stepping up short notice and helping out, getting the meeting started. Do appreciate that help. And also want to say a big thanks to our guests. You know, we got folks coming from all over the globe today, and that's pretty cool. Jim, I know we're working on trying to get some more of our exchange students involved. So again, thanks for helping out with that. Claudia, great to see you. Alicia, thanks again for hanging in there with us. Bill and Julie and Jeff, you know, thanks for coming in from Illinois. It's great to see everybody there. And then I know Ryan and Elisa Ruckel, we had a few visiting Rotarians as well. So that's always really cool. Julie, I look forward to hearing more about the virtual conference. That's going to be pretty cool, although it may be a little added salt in the wounds if we've got pictures of beaches in the background reminding us that nobody gets to go to Hawaii. But still very cool. I know there's a lot going on, obviously with this whole thing, but Rotary International has done a great job trying to adjust to that and get information out to everybody. So it's cool to see their leadership, and we look forward to hearing more about that. So thanks again on that front. I also want to say a big thanks to Lee. It's great to see you, and thanks for joining in, Lee. We, like I said, we look forward to helping you out as you move into further leadership in our district. So cool for joining. Thank you so much for that. So with that, guys, I do want to say a big thank you.
John,
Lisa,
this
do you
is
have
Lisa.
something?
Yep, I just got a notification just as you were speaking. So I did get confirmation. Next week, our speaker will be Scott Gambino. He is from the Quebec 01 Missile Alert Facility State Historic Site. And he's got some pretty cool information and stuff to share with us.
Awesome, Lisa. Thank you for that information. We appreciate that. We will continue to extend this meeting invitation out to our friends that are joining us. So hopefully we'll see some of you next week, and all of our members. It's great to see you guys. Ryan, if you're still on, do want to make sure that let your dad know we're thinking about you guys this week. It's going to be probably a pretty tough week. So we're thinking about you, and don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything we can do to help out. So, but
Thanks,
please pass on all of our best to your dad. Okay.
Will do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, guys, do want to say again, thanks for joining in. Look forward to seeing everybody next week. Have a great week.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, everybody.